I'm Jared.
I'm Marcus.
I'm Dallin.
Level with us. Welcome to our show where we discuss video games with our listeners week by week, and this week we'll be doing a full spoiler discussion of Metroid Dread, including the ending of the game, so if you don't want to be spoiled on it, please play it before listening to this. But before we get started, you may have noticed we have a special guest here. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Dallin. I have been friends with Marcus and Jared for a number of years now, and I am a huge Metroid fan, so I'm super happy to be here to talk about the game.
And that's the reason we asked you to be on here, because, last time we talked about how I just recently got into the series and how Marcus hasn't really been a part of the series, so we thought it'd be good to get a series veteran, because I think that is a valuable perspective to have.
Yes, a resident expert who can, when I say, hidden blocks were the worst, and then you can, say, how dare you, they're the best part, I love those, that kind of thing.
No, I'm with you on hidden blocks, though. The hidden blocks can go away.
They can stay hidden for all that I care.
Since all three of us have finished the game, I feel like we should just go ahead and start with the story and kind of talk about some of the story revelations. And before I ask Dallin what he thought of them, Marcus, did you understand anything that was going on towards the end? I assume you could still follow it, but did anything not make sense to you?
Yes and no. Do you want me to summarize what I got out of it?
Sure. Should we make this our what's happening segment?
Our spoiler what's happening, because I'm gonna start with the end.
Okay, Marcus, spoilers, but what's happening?
The Ravenbeak dude is Samus's quote-unquote father. Ta-da! So I understand her parents were killed by Ridley and space pirates. So then she lived with the Chozos or Chocobos, one of the two, I forget which.
The wrong franchise, Marcus.
And they infused her with their DNA. I guess that's probably how her suit has powers, these genetic type powers. So that's sort of the reveal of the game. There's also a couple of story beats revealed along the way of why this dude wants to make Metroids a bioweapon or Parasite X a bioweapon and stuff like that. But is that right? Did I get that right?
You're in the wheelhouse, I think. I'll give you my corrections and then Dallin can correct me. So Ravenbeak is obviously not her father. She did have biological parents, but then after her parents were killed by Ridley, she was raised by Chozo. He was not her father, but it did show, in a little flashback, that his DNA was donated to her so that she could survive on planet Zebes, because the conditions weren't right for her when the Chozo took her there. And so she had a DNA transplant. So she has Chozo DNA in her. Long story short, he calls her his daughter, even though I'm sure she disagrees with that term, because some of his DNA is in her. But then throughout the course of the franchise, she also gets the Metroid DNA in a vaccine that allows her to absorb Parasite X, so she is the last Metroid in a way, and he wants those powers from her since she already eradicated the Metroids. So, Dallin, come correct me.
Oh yeah, the only addition I might make is that, from what I understand, the Chozo DNA is what allows her to use her suit. I don't know if it's ever super explicitly explained. The reason their suit design is so similar is because it was gifted to her by the Chozo, and I believe it's the DNA itself, right, that allows that.
Well, most humans can't crawl into a little ball, so I assume that has something to do with it. On that note, Don, how did you feel when it comes to this story? How did you feel this was as a kind of a conclusion to the 2D Metroid arc?
I thought this story was so good, and perhaps this is projecting, but it felt pretty clear to me that this was in direct response to Other M and kind of how fans were upset with Samus's portrayal in that game, which was kind of not independent, solely relied on and she's a bounty hunter, so I think we're all expecting her to be the way that she was in Metroid Dread, don't take orders and consult Adam for guidance, and we find out that this Adam in this game is not actually Adam.
Is it just when she was getting intel that every time she did it, that was actually Ravenbeak? Because that twist was lost on me. I didn't quite understand why. Or did he only take over Adam at the last minute before she destroyed it?
Here's my thoughts, or my evidence for why Adam throughout the entire game is not Adam, except for the very beginning cutscene.
Right.
In the beginning cutscene, in her ship, I believe he calls her lady, which is kind of his signature.
That's true.
And that's the last time he does.
My evidence for Adam being Ravenbeak all along. One, he never calls her lady, and whenever he gives her intel, which is kind of suspicious that he's able to get, by the way, he doesn't say any objections, lady. He doesn't call her lady. He doesn't say anything. The reason it makes sense in Fusion for Adam to know everything about the map is because he's literally the computer controlling the space station in Fusion. In this game, this is a random planet. It's kind of weird that he knows everything, and I just kind of accepted it until the big reveal. There's also a major intel moment where he starts talking about Ravenbeak, and he really talks about how amazing Ravenbeak is as a fighter, and he even tells Samus to accept her helplessness, which is not something Adam would say. Even the Adam in Other M that people didn't like, that's not something Adam would say.
Yeah.
He would be like, oh, maybe you don't have a very good chance of survival. Here's the odds or something like that. But he would never say, accept your helplessness. Ravenbeak is this glorious, handsome warrior. Watch out for him.
Interesting. Yeah, if I play through this again, I'll have to look out for the warning signs. Look out for that.
Last week Marcus and I talked about how we really liked the portrayal of Samus's character. So I think we're in the same boat with you, and how rad they make her in this game. And there's one moment in particular I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts on, and that's when she speaks to the Chozo Quiet Beak. I don't know about you, but I got chills. I thought it made so much sense because she speaks Chozo. I just didn't expect her to, because she's been this, strong, silent protagonist the whole game. It makes sense that she would talk to him, but when that moment happened, I don't know, I just thought it was perfectly voiced, and it was such a cool moment for me. What about you guys?
I liked it because it kind of shows that in addition to being kind of your typical silent protagonist, she's also got character, and I think that cutscene in general was pretty cool, pretty interesting, just because that was kind of the main story lore dump of the middle of the game is during that scene. So I thought it was cool that she had some personality throughout.
I agree. I absolutely loved that scene. And we've seen Samus talk before, and I was kind of just expecting Samus not to talk in this game, so I got super giddy when she started speaking Chozo. And I mean, that cutscene was just super exciting because you learn that there's more Chozo, which, by the end of the game, this is another species that's exterminated, but it was a cool moment.
Let's talk gameplay. One of my favorite parts of Metroid games is towards the very end when you've completely powered up and you're just shredding through enemies as you go throughout the map. They're just a cakewalk, especially with the screw attack, which is my favorite item. It feels so empowering to, take little steps throughout the game until you're just fully powered. But that being said, the difficulty spike for me was really hard. I thought some of these bosses were insane, and obviously once you learn their patterns, they become a lot easier. But yeah, what'd you think of the difficulty spike? Or what'd you think of the difficulty overall?
So I thought it struck a really good balance, and I hope it brings in a lot of players to the series. In terms of exploration, it's pretty linear, and I didn't get lost all that much, which isn't the biggest deal. Because when I think of getting lost in a Metroid game, I think of Metroid Fusion, and that game had some really frustrating moments where you bomb a small, tiny wall over in the corner on one edge of the map that you haven't been to in a couple of hours. This game avoided that really well, but it doesn't quite have the same exploration that I really loved in Hollow Knight. So I'm not sure if it's necessarily a good or bad thing. Now, the boss fights were really hard and really fun. Absolutely loved them. Even the ones where I felt like rage quitting because I just couldn't figure out how to beat it. So much fun.
What was the hardest one for you?
Oh, I don't remember the name of it, but it's the boss that's got the 4 arms that you have to shoot at one point in the boss fight. There's one phase where it's vulnerable, and in this one it's the one where it's got its arms on the wall and you have to shoot them, and I was just too stupid to realize you had to shoot the arms. So I was like, wow, there's like 7-8 phases to this boss fight. It just won't die. And that's because I just never shot the arms. So yeah, that was the hardest boss fight for me just because I couldn't figure it out. Sure. Even that was just really fun because the animations are so cool. It's just a really fun time overall.
What about you, Marcus?
Well, I mentioned my struggles with Kraid last time. So yeah, for that question, that was the one that I definitely spent the longest time on.
For me, the hardest ones were the robot Chozos that can dash towards you really fast, especially when you have to face two of them.
Oh, that was hard.
Groaned.
Yeah.
Eventually I became a lot better at fighting them and knowing how they work, but those ones were really hard for me. The final boss as well, I died many, many times, but recently I decided to play through it again, and it took me one try, and it's because I knew the patterns and I knew what to look for, and it was still difficult, but it was doable. So, and I like that. I kind of like boss fights like that in games. Also, especially because it doesn't punish you by making you track through an entire area just to get to that boss again. I appreciate that the game spawns you right before.
Yes, they finally figured out how to do that. I mean, I love Hollow Knight, but Hollow Knight, yeah. The bosses would be super far away from save points, and then you would die because those bosses were also pretty tough. And then you would have to trek all the way back there. So I thought the way Metroid Dread handled the save points was very good.
It's interesting, Dallin, to hear you say that you didn't get lost much in this game, that it felt, fairly linear. Was that your experience too, Marcus?
No. No, it wasn't. It's like how Dallin said that was on me for the bosses. That's kind of what I'm like. I'm like, I got lost a lot. That was on me, though. Like, I'm not gonna fault the genre for being the way that it is. But there was one time specifically where I backtracked through the entire thing. Like, I made it back to the very first point that you start in, the first area. It was a hidden block. Like, so it wasn't easy to see on the map that it was like the next point. We talked about how it lets you see certain doors that you can unlock. The thing was, it wasn't a door that I could unlock. It was just a block that I needed to destroy, which would lower a water level and then let me go to a door that I could unlock.
That poses a really interesting point that you guys brought up during the last podcast, is that the game was deceptively linear. And I think I agree with that. Like, the game felt incredibly linear. It's like, oh, I just keep going, like, forward, and everything happens to be there. Well, I was talking with my friend, and he said he got other items way earlier than I did. Like, he ended up getting the Morph Ball rather early. And as you know, the Morph Ball, I think the normal way to get it is you get it much later in this game as compared to other Metroid games. I think there's a lot of room for sequence breaking and a lot of room for exploration. I just need to go through and play again and see if I can do anything differently this time.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have looked up like on YouTube, but yeah, people are already cracking the game wide open with all sorts of sequence breaks. In fact, one of them blew my mind. There is an alternate way to defeat Kraid. If you get the bombs early, there's a little square in the bottom left of the fight on the wall that you can fit into, and it'll shoot you into his belly. And you can explode him from the inside. It's insane, and it's only there if people go out of their way to break the sequence of the game first, which is just crazy. And then, like, I've already seen so many clips just pop up on my feed of, like, people doing something called pinballing, where they, like, bounce off an enemy, like, get hurt by an enemy in order to go onto a platform that should be inaccessible. And then speedruns obviously are already crazy. Even in the first week, people have gotten it to under an hour and a half, I think, ish.
Wow.
That's insane.
All right, well, we have to move on. But any final thoughts about Metroid Dread as far as gameplay goes? Anything else you want to get off your chest before we move on to quick jabs?
My last thought here is that I'm just so happy this game exists. I remember being in 5th grade on the playground talking about the Metroid Dread leaks. It was supposed to be a DS game, and I've just been waiting for this game for so long, so I'm just so happy it exists. And that it's good.
But it can't all be good, because we got to get into quick jabs.
Jab, 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 jab. 1, 2, and jab, jab.
This is the part of the show where we complain about the game, but only very, very briefly. That's why it's a quick jab, so have no fear, we will say more good things about Metroid later. But I want to start. I was actually a little let down by some of the music in this game. And that might be a hot take because both Marcus and Dallin here are composers. And I'll have to hear what your opinions are, but there's some things I love about the game. I thought the sound design overall was amazing. And some of the ambient tracks are great. But whenever the game plays a fanfare, it has meaty brass in it. And I can't stand meaty brass. Like, I'm going to play the jingle that plays whenever you get a new item. It sounds okay. It just sounds underwhelming. It doesn't have a punch to it. I wish they either fully orchestrated that hit, or I wish they went all synth and made it super synthy. Because I can't stand when people try to do this kind of faux, fake brass. As someone, and by the way, I used to play French horn, so maybe I'm super sensitive to this. But that's something that just kind of let me down. Please tear my argument to shreds, guys. I'd be curious what your takes are.
I'll validate you just a slight bit here by saying when I got to the credits roll and I was listening to the credits music, I was like, yeah. I mean, we're in a post Breath of the Wild world right now, so like it's not like it wasn't possible for them to orchestrate this. I'm curious if that was ever discussed, but there were occasionally times where I was also like, Metroid is one of the main staples of Nintendo, and the music is usually treated lovingly, so it's just interesting that it isn't live, which is fine. Dallin?
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. My quick jab was, which I didn't want to give a quick jab, by the way. I'm just too happy this game exists, and I don't want to say anything negative about it. But my quick jab was the end credit music.
Oh, wow.
Okay, great. We're on the same page.
We did it again. We brought a guest, and still all three of us had something similar to say in the quick jabs.
And I'm like, you guys aren't going to say this, but I guess I was wrong. So I did like the music overall. I did feel maybe some of the synth brass was could have been more synth or, less synth. It was kind of an awkward, middle. But my jab about, the end credit music is that it just doesn't really suit the game or the series. A lot of the Metroid games do this, which is why I think they did it for Dread. It's the game's over, and so they have this really kind of big fanfare type music. But I think Metroid Prime's a great example of what they could do with end credit music. Keep the melodies and keep the same atmosphere, keep the same vibe that you presented throughout the game. I'm the kind of person who's going to sit through all of the credits, and I just want to reflect on that experience. Yeah. And the best way to do that is with, music that recaps what I experienced. The music at the end of Dread felt like it should have been at the end of a Pokemon game, and it would have been really good for that. But it just was where did this come from?
It's a 5-star Pokemon song.
But it's not unique to Dread. A lot of the Metroid games do this. If you play Super Metroid or even Fusion did this, I think. So
it's validating to hear that because I was a little disappointed by the credits, and I think I agree. I thought the ending of the game was really strong, but the music brought it down just a tad.
The ending was so over the top, and it was crazy good, but and you're kind of having an adrenaline rush from the escape sequence, or at least I did. Even though I know they're always designed to be doable.
Yeah, right.
And then immediately after that, you're met with this strange choice of an end credits composition. So.
Well, Marcus, did you have another quick jab as well?
Oh, we actually have a listener quick jab here.
Oh, yes, please.
Listener Nathan, he sent an essay, and he told me I could trim it down. So I think I will take him up on that. I will read a part of it, though. He has a really good thought here. He says, I felt ridiculously aware of the game design itself. Not that it took away from my enjoyment, but I never felt wholly immersed in the game world. And then he kind of goes on to say why he basically was kind of thinking of it in terms of locks and keys and, felt very aware of the Metroidvania-ness of it all. And later on he says, don't get me wrong, the design was brilliant and I loved the game. I just wish it instilled the same awe and anticipation in me as in Metroid Prime. So he was kind of hoping for more of an atmospheric feel to it, feeling more fully immersed in the world rather than being aware of the game mechanics.
You know, that makes sense, because in Prime, you know, everything is designed to not be in blocks or in a grid. It's more organic as you go through the world. But the 2D games, just by nature of being 2D, and also by using, you know, blocks that can only be hit by a certain thing, like, yeah, that does make it feel more gamey, like a little less, like, you know, Samus is hitting blocks that reappear after a few seconds, you know, kind of thing. Like, I get that. Like, that's in a lot of games, so I can understand that one.
I hate to bring up the game again, but in Hollow Knight...
This isn't about... We're talking about Dread, guys.
No, talk about Hollow Knight. Do it.
This is another thing that Nathan put in his quick jab, is he says he knows that these feelings aren't just the result of the difference between 2D and 3D spaces, because he felt like Hollow Knight nailed more of this atmospheric, immersive world.
Well, I mean, that game is hand-drawn, so he's not wrong.
I understand where Nathan's coming from. I kind of felt the same way.
Well, now that we have crawled through the depths of Artaria and gotten past our negativity, we can now emerge triumphant through Dairon and go into our Star Pieces. Star Pieces is the part of the show where we get to gush about a little detail that we noticed or something that we really enjoyed about our playthrough. Dallin, would you start us off?
Yes. It was kind of a bigger detail, I guess, but just for Renia as a whole, that sector has to be like one of my favorite sectors of any Metroid game. Like the art design was so cool, just like a Chozo like temple. It kind of gets like Jedi temple vibes. I loved that sector. I loved the difficulty of that sector. There's tons of cutscenes there. It's just that area was a fun time. It has some of the hardest Shine Spark challenges in the whole game there. I love that area.
That actually rolls really well into my Star Piece, which was the power-up puzzles. Like, the things you have to do to get the extra missile expansions and health power-ups. I thought some of those puzzles were really clever, and they made me do a lot of critical thinking. And I did eventually 100% the game yesterday, although I 100% agree, some of the Shine Spark puzzles are insanely hard. I had to look up online, not how to do the puzzle, but how does Shine Sparking work, because I was doing it in a particular way and I didn't realize lots of little rules on how it works. It's actually very complex. But yeah, I thought the puzzles were dang clever.
Nice. My Star Piece, just another thing about power-ups generally, which is that I liked how they felt really cool and powerful, even though they functionally weren't. Like, functionally, they did not actually open that many doors. Like, there were a lot of power-ups where I'm like, oh, dang, now I can go anywhere, do anything, and destroy all the enemies. This feels dope. And then you realize, oh, no, I can open 3 doors with this. That's what this does. But no, I liked it. I liked how it was like, oh, now I can do, like, these cool dash things that, like, help me in combat. But functionally, like, it isn't really helping me get anywhere new. So I guess I'll have to find the next one. Yeah.
What was your favorite power-up in the game?
I mean, the screw attack was pretty great. I'll probably say, like, the flash shift or whatever it is, the kind of like the 3 quick dashes that you can do, because those were pretty integral to the way that I would defeat certain bosses and difficult enemies.
Sure. What about you, Dallin?
So I think my favorite was the Storm Strike missiles. Those were so cool. And for me, as soon as I got those, most of the boss fights and mini bosses were actually maybe a little on the easy side. But like they're just so cool. They reminded me of, like, you know, if you've seen The Mandalorian, he's got those, I think they call them like the whistling birds in there.
I was a little disappointed that the I should have just avoided spoilers, but the second trailer for the game had almost all the power-ups in it.
After that first trailer, I stopped watching trailers.
That's a good idea. That's what I'm going to do next time for sure. We have 2 more Star Pieces. The first one was submitted to us by Yokai Disorder. They said, the progression of your weapons is amazing, replacing your missiles with the super missiles and then replacing them with the ice missiles. It's very satisfying. I completely agree with him. That was something I liked about Fusion, was that you just upgrade your missiles instead of you have to switch between them. When I played Super, I got really annoyed by that I had to swap. So I prefer them just upgrading your base thing.
Yeah, that was nice.
So thank you for submitting that.
Listener Nathan also sent in a Star Piece. This one I will read in full. He says, the 7th Emmy, but also the Emmys in general. I never felt unfairly punished. They were a fascinating puzzle that left me feeling, well, dread, but never frustrated. I always knew what I did to mess up when they got me, and they were each so different in how their environments shaped their encounters that they never felt repetitive. I agree. I thought the Emmys were pretty cool. Sometimes difficult.
Yeah, that last Emmy, I loved, like, defeating the Emmys. And, like, the way it made you wait to, like, charge up your weapon, that was pretty fun, yeah.
All right, let's get into the Reaper review. This is the quiz segment of our podcast where we try and stump each other with nerdy trivia questions. And I'm going to start with our question from last week that we left up to the listeners. I'm going to ask Dallin this before we give the answer, and I'll go ahead and read it again. Which of the following is not a power-up in Metroid Zero Mission for the GBA? The Charge Beam, the Plasma Beam, the Spazer Beam, the Ice Beam, the Wave Beam, and the Long Beam.
Alright, well, given that Zero Mission is a remake of the original, that means Long Beam is in the game. Ice Beam is in the game. I'm pretty sure Spazer's in the game. I think it's gonna be something like Charge Beam. I'll go with Charge Beam.
I am afraid you are incorrect. The answer is the Spazer Beam. The Spazer Beam is in Super Metroid, but this game does not have it, and that's a tricky one because in some games it's called the Spazer Beam, in some games it's called the Wide Beam. But yeah, that was admittedly a very difficult question, so no worries. Well, Dallin, did you bring a trivia question for us?
Yeah. I'll open up to both of you, although I think Jared's more inclined to know the answer here, but was Metroid Dread the first game to feature Ravenbeak?
No. Final answer.
Yikes. I'm going to say yes, because I swear... No. I have to go with no, because he's in the pictures that you unlock in the remake of Samus Returns.
Oh, so Jared got the specifics.
I'll say no as well.
There we go. Almost tripped you up there.
Well, Marcus, do you have a question as well?
My question is one that I definitely know the answer to. How many genes does Samus actually have in her? Like, what's in her?
Well, I saw someone's post on Reddit. They had she's been subjected to like Metroid DNA, Chozo DNA, the X parasite, and bad writing.
The poor thing.
2 Chozo, or Metroid, X parasite. Definitely like Phazon.
Oh yeah.
If we're including Prime stuff. What's that? 5? I think that's 5.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I have 5 written down as well. I don't have Phazon, though. I had human. No one said human.
I guess that counts.
I assume she has human DNA in her.
Oh my gosh, her parents' DNA is in her.
Whoa.
2 humans' DNA, you idiots. No, and in case you were wondering, the two kind of chocobo genes that it had.
Don't say chocobo.
The 2 Chozo DNAs that she has in her are Thoha and Makin, I believe.
I don't know a lot about the Chozo, but it was, I don't know. I thought all those were really cool. And we've never seen Chozo in a game before. But I have to do a question. I'm going to leave this open to both of you as well. I have with me here the game, because I'm going to describe a path through the world map, and you have to point out when I make a wrong turn. Does that make sense?
But Jared, what you're telling me right now is you're going to like use a teleporter that doesn't actually exist into an area, but they're all so interconnected.
I will say this path works with or without the teleporters, so you don't have to worry about the teleporters.
Okay.
I start out in Burenia before making my way over to Dairon. Then I head to Arteria, followed by Kataris. Then I head up to Ferenia, and then Hanubia, before heading over to Gavoron, and then ending in Elune.
No, you can't do that.
What part?
You can't do that.
I'm pretty sure it's the Kataris to Ferenia. You can only get to the 3rd Dairon, right? And you can only get to the 1st Arteria. Gosh, I'm forgetting all the names. But yeah, Kataris, you can't go to Ferenia.
You got it right.
Oh, thank goodness.
Well done.
Thank goodness you got it. That meant I didn't have to try. Oh my gosh.
Well done, Dallin. You have proven once again that you are the biggest nerd when it comes to Metroid. Congratulations.
Definitely.
All right, we don't have much time left, but really quick, let's do rabbit holes. Rabbit holes is the part of the show where we get to talk about something not related to our current discussion, and it's just an opportunity to either gush or vent or some other third verb.
Gent or Vush.
Gent or Vush. Pretty sure that's an area on the map in Metroid Dread. Marcus, would you kindly start us off?
For certain. I want to shout out a project that I'm affiliated with. There's a podcast out there called Celestial Horizons that I've written some music for, and it's really fascinating in the sense that it is constantly evolving. Right now, it is a podcast where audience members can interact and influence the story by kind of like voting on propositions and stuff. Ultimately, it's going to expand into different new media territory. So it's just a really fascinating thing to follow its development. But the story of these podcasts, specifically, I think there have been 3 distinct podcast stories that take place in different time periods so far. But it covers the travels of humans basically starting a space colony. When they get there, they expect to set up a wormhole gate to get back to Earth and set up communications. But their communication with Earth is like completely cut off. They hear nothing from Earth. And that's pretty much where the story is now. They've built this society kind of just around the assumption that, you know, we may or may not ever speak to Earth again. So it's a cool sci-fi thing that I definitely recommend to anyone. And what you guys are listening to right now is actually one of the tracks that I wrote for the thing.
That's really cool. I haven't been involved with Celestial Horizons, but I've seen them do some pretty interesting stuff when it comes to interaction with the audience and how they affect the story. So some very cool ideas, and we will for sure put a link in the description of this podcast and in the YouTube version so that people can check it out. Dallin, do you have a rabbit hole that you might have fallen down recently?
Or a plug. We're doing plugs today.
Plugs today? No, well, so I started playing Darkest Dungeon recently. It's been pretty fun. You've basically inherited this manor, this estate that's like overrun with like really dark fantasy stuff. And you have tons of adventurers come to your town for search of money and fame, and you assemble a team of different adventurers that come to your town, and then you send them out into the dungeon. And depending on how well you do, they can develop different phobias or different strengths. You have to be aware of their stress levels in addition to their health and hunger. And then it's really cool. After you finish a run, you go back to the town and you either send them to the church to pray away the demons, or you send them to do other recreational activities to try to recover from whatever quirks they developed. The combat itself, like a lot of the adventurers can develop different abilities, and and once they die, they're gone. So you're motivated to, keep your adventurers around, even though there's an endless supply of them.
That's cool. I'll have to check it out.
Jared, what you been up to? What's your hole of rabbits?
For my rabbit hole, I'm going to forego it and instead plug both of you guys because you are excellent composers, and I want people to know where they can find you.
Aw, thanks.
I've obviously had the pleasure of working with Marcus on many, many, many projects, and I really like his music. He's done great music for this podcast, and Dallin has done some very cool stuff as well. Would you guys mind telling our listeners where they can find your music?
So you can find me on SoundCloud under Dallin Frank, and then I've also got a YouTube channel, although don't post there as much just due to copyright concerns, particularly with like film scoring stuff. But yeah, you can find me on SoundCloud and YouTube under Dallin Frank.
And then Marcus, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find my music just under my name, Marcus Richardson, on Spotify. I think right now what I have up is a soundtrack that I worked on for another fiction podcast called Radioland.
I actually revisited the Radioland soundtrack recently, and it's good. It's real good. There's some good stuff. There's some folk in it. There's some weird synth stuff. Everything Marcus does is pretty cool.
I try to put a lot of MIDI brass in my stuff. I really like the uncanny valley between MIDI and brass.
You suck.
Just real good sweet spot in between the two.
But, the funny thing is, I bet you could make it work. I bet you could use MIDI brass. It's when people use MIDI brass to replace what should be brass. That's what I hate. I did not like it in Metroid. But don't worry, I will cut that from the podcast. Well, Dallin, it's been a pleasure to have you on this show. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I love to gush about Metroid games, so...
This has been a lot of fun. Next week, we will be going over some deck building games, specifically Griftlands, Slay the Spire, and Dicey Dungeons. So if you have a thought on any of those 3 games, please go ahead and submit it to us at levelwithUspodcast@gmail.com, and we will read those on the show. But until then, I'm Jarrett.
I'm Marcus.
And I'm Dallin.
And we'll level with you next week. Thank you for leveling with us. The excellent remixes of Metroid music you heard in this episode can be found on ocremix.org, and links to each one of them are listed in the description. At the beginning of the episode, you also heard a Metroid-inspired piece by Marcus and Dallin. All other original music was composed by Marcus. Thanks, Marcus. Wait, Marcus, weren't you going to play a song for us this week?
I don't remember saying that. Yes, I was. I think I'm going to give it another week or two. Give a few more people the chance to take me up on the offer. So if anyone wants to get in on that, they can still leave a review on Apple Podcasts for our show for a special shout out from myself.
A special musical shout out.
A special musical shout out from myself.
Oh, and then, I've seen Shine Spark stuff, too, to get the gravity suit early, which, if I play this game again, which I will, I want to try that, because there's so much water in this game that the gravity suit, having that early would be so nice.
7 out of 10, too much water.
Yep.
I feel bad for outing Dallin as not the expert of all things Metroid, so I think we should edit this. Dallin, can we get one fresh take, please, of you saying... it is the Spazer Beam final answer?
Oh, Spazer Beam for sure. I knew that one.
You got it.
Man, that's really impressive.
Wow, it didn't take him any time at all to think up the answer. He got
right
it.
off the top of his head.
And I played the game on release and haven't played it since. My memory is just that good.
Dang. I knew we made the right decision having you on this episode.